I would like to start with a poem. I saw in the Congress page that the presentations should be prepared in English. I didn't know that we had such a chance. I prepared my presentation in English and I had to translate the poem myself. I'm not an expert in translation, but as for the poem, French critic says that the poem is something which is lost in translation, and I think there's some part of the poem which is not lost in translation. This is my presentation plan. I will try to express myself first, and then I will be talking about some scientific debates, and then I do have some paranoia. I will be talking about my doubts, and then I will be talking about my dream, and then I will come back to the beginning of my presentation with a poem, and then I will leave you with questions in your mind. Sadness, which is most appropriate for us, maybe we understand the best. This is a poem by Hilmi Yavuz. I believe that sadness is appropriate for psychiatrists. And I believe that we can't completely understand sadness. Yes, sadness is appropriate for us because it's a privilege for us to be sad about the situation of your profession, the slow progress of the situation. Then it makes you happy, because feeling happy because of being able to feel sorrow. I'm talking about sadness, and I say that I'm happy because I can feel sad. This is the reality about the emotions, because there is a satisfaction in being able to get angry, and I believe that sadness is an inducer.
Beni üzen şey ne?
So what am I sorry about? What am I sad about? Especially about depression and antidepressants and the speculations around those, and also diagnostic ambiguities, as I have put on my slides. These are giving me a sense of sorrow. Also problems of validity and reliability and all the discussions going around those. Also doubts or suspects about antidepressants, which are often voiced, and also the discussions about exclusion criteria. The criteria seem not to be more clarified in time. Also lack of confidence and insecurities related to diagnostics, and these criticisms of ours have increased after DSM-5. You see some headlines, covers from the foreign journals and saying antidepressants are dangerous, that they would kill you. This is an article from The Guardian from February 2008. It says Prozac used by 40 million people does not work. And this discussion is still going on. This is interesting discussions, especially people in a certain camp. They seem to be overconfident with their thesis. I myself are not that confident, and I'm just sharing how I feel with you. Well, of course, how do we diagnose depression? You know, we mostly do this based on DSM-5, and the presence of 5 symptoms out of 9 we say are enough for diagnosing depression. 5 over 9, is this question enough? This is still a debate. Well, let's see how we define the major depressive period. There are notes, and we find a lot of notes and long sentences with a lot of commas and everything, never-ending sentences. When you start reading them out loud, you start laughing at yourself. So it has to be this way, it should be in the absence of that. And so there is also a footnote at the end of the note. What is this? As you know, it's about when we can exclude mourning or when we can include them in depression. So first it was limited to the loss of a loved one, but with the DSM-5 it says if these symptoms meet the criteria of a mood period, now that exclusion is also excluded. So excluding mourning has been excluded in DSM-5, and which is receiving a lot of criticism. Let's continue. Let's see with DSM-5. See the statements here. It should not be dependent on another medical condition. It should be dependent on another medical condition. So if they said they would not be other than the symptoms of a known medical condition. But this wording is giving me the doubts. And then one comes to ask, why are we doing all these scientific studies if this is the case? Let's say I found a molecule called depressin and it's increasing in the blood. Then in that case we would not call it a depression. It's called an increase in induced by an increase in the depressin. So why do they call it a medical condition? This is interesting. Another thing is the HPA axis, which is interesting to me. This is a review from 28th of February 2019. So the HPA axis is not closed yet. We have things to say about it. And for example, dexamethasone suppression test. You know, it's in the textbooks as well. But it has low sensitivity, from 20 to 50%. So we don't use it. We abandoned it. Also DST combined with the CRH stimulation test, which is called the DEX-CRH. It has improved sensitivity. It helps us classify depression, and also of up to 80% of depressed patients. But again, there are criticisms because of sensitivity and specificity. That's why it is not used. Another research by the authors of this article, it talks about potential use of dexamethasone-induced gene expression changes, and shows it's pointing to alterations of the HPA axis, saying this could be a potential biomarker in depression, independent of the dexamethasone test. What else do we have? We have the GR antagonists such as mifepristone, which have been shown to have beneficial effects with psychotic major depressive disorder. Also metyrapone, a steroid synthesis inhibitor, has also demonstrated benefit in augmenting treatment. Are these important for us? Are they reflected on our clinic? No, they're not, or maybe rarely reflected on our clinic. And Hassan Bey is going to talk about them. And they're not reflecting on our clinic because we don't know anything of them. So I'm going to share with you some assumptions. We can expand it to thyroid releasing hormone or to GABA activity, the glutamatergic activity increase. So I'm just focusing on the HPA axis here. So a little bit of paranoia. Well, in terms of diagnostic value of data, how do we approach the data and symptoms? Is there depressive mood? Is there loss of interest or pleasure? Yes, these are cardinal symptoms. And also allergy is a cardinal symptom. Also, sleep, lack of attention, or heightening or slowing down of motor functions, and maybe some other symptoms which you interestingly cannot find in DSM or textbooks. These are not in DSM or textbook, but they are quite common in depression. And this is interesting because in depression, pseudodementia, urinary rhythm, arrhythmia, somatic symptoms, pain threshold lowering, these are not covered in the DSM. The impairment in the HPA axis, its diagnostic value is regarded as if none. So these are, see the symptoms at the top, they're very valuable, but the impairment HPA axis, it's not, because it's not. Yes, but we diagnosed it as depression based on DSM. So if that's the case, how much of the cases we diagnose as depression according to DSM are really depression cases? And what are the inclusion criteria in the studies? And what are the other factors? Or I'm going to talk about them as well. So that does not sound plausible or realistic approach to me. I mean, first taking 5/9 as reference, and then saying that the tests for HPA axis is not valid. This makes no sense to me. So when we take a look at depression from a historic perspective, we see that Hippocrates defined depression in a more biological terms than today's scientific tradition. So the four humors, black bile, yellow bile, blood, and also sputum. It says that, flame, and these are defined in the Islamic science as well, or in Hippocrates. So they were approaching to this from a more biological perspective than us, but we're not checking any of those fluids, and in this age of laboratories, that is. So I want to talk about this book, which was published in 2007. It's called The Loss of Sadness. It says how psychiatry transformed normal sorrow into depressive disorder. So this is an inside criticism, because the authors are psychiatrists. So it contains some severe criticism about our diagnostic criteria and our general approach to sorrow, sadness, and it was published in 2007. And I'd like to draw your attention to this, Horowitz and Wakefield. Now this is another book, one statement from this book. 20th century was defined as the age of anxiety, and the 21st century can easily be defined as the age of depression. And here is another book, Sadness or Depression, by Wakefield, and also Horowitz is one of the editors. So after DSM-5 was published, you can find this frustration in every page of this book. And you know, DSM-5 restricted mourning to the loss of one loved person, and we should not limit it to the loss of loved ones. And in 2007 book, they were recommending that the definition of mourning should be broader, and after they published this, the DSM-5 just reduced the scope of mourning. And of course, if this is how you define it, you can diagnose the patient as depressive. But there should be no medical conditions. So this book from 2016 is also severely criticizing the diagnostic approach. Here is another publication talking about increased use of antidepressants, saying 1 out of every 9 adults is using antidepressants, or 1 in 4 women are using antidepressants, according to data, saying this could not be realistic. You know how we grade depression, saying light, mild, or severe. Well, of course, I admit that for psychiatry or general medicine, I'm not expecting to have linear rules, but of course, I believe that these things would fall in the area of psychology or other social sciences. When you administer drugs, this is not getting the problem solved, and when you persist on this behavior, you talk about tolerance. And of course, the drug industry, it's an enormous market. The disease market will never be satiated, and so it gets one to wonder whether we are being players in certain strategies or scenarios. So here is another question for you as we are sharing our problems. Do we pay less attention to the signs and symptoms which we cannot treat? For example, sexual symptoms not being included in DSM. Or maybe I'm going to talk about something else. You see this book, Roger McIntyre published this book in 2014. McIntyre. Okay. The book is called Cognition in Major Depressive Disorder. For the first time, a concept book dealing with cognition in major depressive disorder. I researched and I found this book, but when I searched in PubMed, there are tens of different studies or articles in PubMed, starting with 1964. And also in 2016, McIntyre published another book, and interestingly, this was translated at the speed of light, and in 2018, I think it was published, distributed to all of you. The distributing company was Lundbeck. Now, I'm not criticizing anyone or anything, and I'm just focusing on the cognitive symptoms. And I want to give you the good news that another book is coming in 2019, talking about cognitive dimensions and major depressive disorders. So, as Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. I too have a dream, and I will talk about it now to you. Well, this has always been my dream, but I had to formulate it into PowerPoint. So I started looking for an example from different medical disciplines. I asked a rheumatologist friend of mine how they diagnose rheumatoid arthritis. He gave me an example. He said, how many joints are involved? Even if more than 10 joints are involved, it gets only 5 points. And you need more than 6 points in order to diagnose rheumatoid arthritis. So, also you need another point from serology, acute phase reactance, or duration of symptoms. If it does not get any points from those other parameters, you cannot diagnose a rheumatoid arthritis. It's like the premenstrual disorders in our discipline. But it makes sense. The rheumatoid arthritis. This is not positive in all the rheumatoid factor is not active in all the patients of rheumatoid arthritis. And it's about the dexamethasone suppression test. And I asked my friend what is the prevalence, and it said 40% of the society. So 2 blood parameters, duration of symptoms, and also the number of joints involved. So I have a dream. I too have a dream, which is hopefully going to lay the ground for naive hypothesis. If we can come together and maybe we can have a more biopsychosocial based diagnosis, and maybe we can talk about disorders, and maybe we can talk about a major depressive disease, not disorder. So I did some little mathematical games here. So as you can see, 6 points each for depressive mode, and here I give 6 points each for depressive mood and also other loss of interest or pleasure, and then I give 1 point each to vegetative symptoms. Okay, I'll go faster. So this is the scoring. So if the score is more than 17, we can talk about depressive disease. What if this was the case? But there is this thing. Even if they get points from all of those, it cannot go above 17 if it does not get a point from HPA axis alteration. So when I have this dream, I think this would be very useful in the medical board, or we could see whether it's accompanied by other symptoms. Well, this is just a dream. It's just a quick exercise I did in an hour. I'm going back to the beginning. So depression defined by Hippocrates, and then the more modern definition of depression is, as you can see here in the first, in the one on the right is sorrow, and yet we call it depression today. Well, depression is for sure a devastating illness, but it shouldn't be a commodity. Also, we have to put depression on a more reliable base. Otherwise, psychiatry will be accused, increasingly accused, to be a servant of the big pharma. I think this is a good reason for sadness, but could not be a reason for depression. Also, I want to finish with a poem which I believe defines depression very well.